Hi, I'm here to give a quick overview of your model diplomacy simulation that we'll be doing for the rest of the semester. So you should have received an email, which you have to use to register to get into the simulation. You cannot be assigned a role, and you cannot complete any of the assignments until you register and have access to this simulation. So once you're in here, you'll see a couple of different options. The overview gives you the overview of the simulation and the situation of climate change. Here is where you then need to go to the details of our pop-up case, and I'll show you how to access that in a couple of different ways. The first task that you're going to do is go into the NSC guide. The NSC guide describes the National Security Council and tells you exactly what you need to know about the process of how the NSC works. The idea is that you go through each section, you read all the material, you watch the short videos, many of which are recorded by people who have actually held some of the positions that you will be representing. It goes through the NSC interagency process, which you have to understand. So again, you do need to watch all of these short videos to give you context. And they do include, for example, here, Colin Powell contributes to this video. I'm going to jump down. Each of the sections provides different types of information. So you'll read this timeline in detail. And then they end with a glossary of common terms. You can also access each of these sections up here through this table of contents. When you are finished with the NSC guide, go over to Blackboard to take the NSC guide assessment, which is based only on the information and materials in the text and in the videos in this section. And it is an open note and short answer assessment. So all of the assessment questions are short answer or short essay where you will type your answers in your own words, drawing from what you learned here. And then you'll move on to the case notes. In the case notes, I need to show you a couple of things that are specific to our pop-up case, starting with the issue. You, when you are in the issue, are going to read about the general issue of climate change and then go into the pop-up case. So the issue of climate change you'll learn about here. And then when you get to the decision point, that's where we are going to be doing the pop-up case. I've given you access to the pop-up case in a couple of different places. You can go over here to look at the annotations. This will appear differently on your screen because I am logged in as an instructor. So under the annotations, I've written for you the pop-up case. So the decision point for the pop-up case is different. Another way to access this is to go into Blackboard. And when you go into Blackboard and you go into our class, you can go down to the folder for the last 4 weeks. And I've given you this document in a couple of different spots. So you're looking for this pop-up situation document, and you should keep this open while you go through the case notes. So you can see here, the pop-up case has a different decision point than the general case. So we are working on the pop-up case of a meeting in January 2021 with a new presidential term, and what are we going to do? The situation here describes also the context of the pandemic. So this is a little bit different in terms of giving you the situation for climate change after the pandemic. So I'll hop on over to case notes. So again, you'll use that annotation or go to that one pager. You'll keep going through the rest of the case notes to give you the context of climate change, the recent history of climate change, the timeline, and the root causes. These are all updated up until really this current fall. So you'll learn about all of the history through the current president and his change in policy for the United States. When you get to the role of the United States, that's the other spot where you will read here about 3 strategic goals and use the pop-up case to understand the policy options that are to be considered at your pop-up case meeting about the pandemic and the climate change specifically. So instead of considering these 3 options under the role of the United States, you'll be considering these options under the role of the pop-up case. Once you are done with this section, and you can see this is highlighted too, so I've got the annotation here. So you should see a little dot pop up. Once you're done with that section, you'll go through other interested parties and the glossary, and then you will take the second assessment on the case that is in Blackboard, and again, is built on the material in the case notes. Then you'll move on to the role play. Your role will be determined, again, once you register. You may already have your role assigned when you log in the next time. If you do not, that means that you might not have registered in time and you missed the role assignment. So please notify me and I will go in and update your role ASAP. But I cannot assign you a role and confirm your role until you actually register for the simulation. So you need to activate that. So the role will describe your role. It will give you some information, and I'll go ahead and click on the president, and it will tell you the description, the goals, and your issues for consideration. Here, again, you need to read this and also keep in mind the context of our pop-up case. So some of the roles will be shifted a little bit to adapt to the pop-up case. And that's going to depend upon your specific role. So once you go through your specific role, then you would go into research and preparation, which just gives you an overview of how to approach the memo and to figure out what it is that you're doing. So draw on the notes, make sure that you go through this process, and then move right into the memo. So the guide to the memo gives you very clear guidelines on what you should be writing. A memo is short, and I will show you in a moment how short. So everybody but the president writes this memo. I'll talk about what to do if you are the president in a moment. So you are writing the memo from the position of your assigned role. The guidelines are here. They are specific and should be followed to the letter. Click here to see a sample of what this looks like. So this is the sample memo. Yours should look the same. Here's the date, who it's from, who the memo is for, and the subject. And then it describes the memo, gives you the background, objectives, options, and analysis. So you will analyze these 3 options in your memo for the pop-up case. Again, your options that you are analyzing come from the pop-up case. There are 3 different options that you have to analyze from the position of your agency. This needs to be specific and precise. If you note, this says very specifically the analysis of this particular option from the position of this role. The limit on, I'll go back here in a moment, the limit on the policy memo or position memo is 1,000 words. That's it. Every single one of your 1,000 words should count. Your recommendations and justifications also need to be very precise. So you need to recommend what your priority is from these options over here, and then justify it from the position of your particular agency or of the particular group that you are representing. Again, it's 1,000 words, but every word should count. If you are the president, you will not be writing a position memo because you will be writing this presidential directive after you decide to take an action. So the presidents are going to draft their own individual directive. There will be several presidents, so you will each be handing in your own, but you can collaborate on that, and obviously you're going to decide to do the same thing in the meeting, but you could vary when you write your presidential directive if you want. So the presidential directive will be what they decided to do. So if you notice up here, it says from the president, Presidential Directive 1. The memo is to everybody else, and it tells everybody what you decided to do. You will say what your response is going to be, and you will justify it. You will also say how you plan to implement it. This presidential directive will be sent to everybody in the class, and everybody in the class will need this for the final step of the simulation under the wrap-up. So the wrap-up includes a policy review memo, and we will talk more about this in class, but the policy review memo is based in part on the presidential directive. So in part 3, everybody but the presidents will be writing a guide or a memo, so you'll be using the guide to the memo. We will have our simulation and our role play, and then the presidents will decide what to do. They will issue their presidential directive to everybody in the class, and then everybody in the class will write the policy review memo, which is the last assignment in this experience. So I hope this gives you a good overview to get started. Again, we are building on the climate change policy simulation using this situation and decision point for the pop-up case. Thank you.